Hello, my name's Natasha and today I'm going to talk to you about some of my recent reads. I've previously done books 1 to 5 and 6 to 11 of the books that I've read in 2020, and this is going to be books 12 to 18 maybe, if we can get through that. I am still struggling with coronavirus, but I am getting better, but please excuse my voice if it's a bit croaky. Just about to film my recent reads, and when I looked at the last recent reads list, I realised that the first book that I reviewed in the last video was the last book I'd reviewed in the previous video. So I obviously felt the need to review The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo twice, which is a bit excessive. So I'm just going to jump in here. I will look different as I continue, of course, and tell you about the book that I should have told you about, and that is The Unseen World by, I've already forgotten her name, Liz Moore. The Unseen World by Liz Moore, and it's set in 1980 with a young girl called Ada. I think she's 12, but I might have got that wrong, and her father is a scientist, and I think he's a computer scientist, and she goes to work with him every day. She doesn't go to school or anything like that, so she's actually feels like a part of his research team, and so she's technically been homeschooled all of her life. Problems appear when David develops Alzheimer's. David's her dad, and he gives Ada a floppy disk that contains a code for something that he wants her to break the code, so she can decipher it, and then the book continues from there. And as a scientist, I was really looking forward to this book, and I was hoping that it was going to be quite a lot of scientific things about her breaking this code, and actually that isn't what it's about. I thought it'd be about sort of being in the lab and researching and all of this stuff. And actually my expectations were very wrong. It's actually a book about Ada and about her growing older and her developing as an individual, and it's a lot more about her personal development. Overall it was a good book, but it just left me wanting a little bit more because I went into it with the wrong idea of the book that it was. It was my preconceived ideas that made this book disappointing, not the book itself. And it was my own fault, and that's why I try and go into books open-minded. But I gave this 4 stars overall. I think if you go into it not expecting it to be a scientific novel, then I think you would be less disappointed. I just thought it was different. I quite liked it. The 13th book that I have read in 2020 was an e-arc that I got through NetGalley, and that was The Rearranged Life of Oona Lockhart by Margarita Montemore, I think is her name. It has a different title in the US. I can't remember what it's called, but I will put it somewhere. And in this story we begin in 1982, and Oona is at a party and she's with her boyfriend and her mates and her bandmates, and New Year's Day is her birthday, and as the clock strikes 12 she gets this like weird feeling, and next thing you know she's in a different body. Well, it's her body, but she's a different age, and so she jumps every year on New Year's Eve. So every year of her birthday she jumps into her body in another year, and it's not chronological, and it was good because it left me eager to see what year she would jump into next, and how old she was, and the struggles that she had in her life at that time, and the things that she would face. I didn't feel that there were many jumps in the book. I would have liked to have more jumps. I don't know, it was something that I was enjoying, and I would have liked there to have been more. But it was well written, it was engaging, it was funny, there were some deep emotional storylines as well, and it was a really thought-provoking book and a really good premise, so I actually quite enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars too, and I've thought about it a couple of times afterwards as well, so it's one of those ones that sort of sit with you a little bit. The 14th book I read was Broiled by Rachel Hawkins, and to be honest I wasn't that excited by this book, I just heard a lot of good things about the second book in the series, so I thought I should read this in order to be able to continue the series. In this book, there's a girl, I think she's 16, and her name is Daisy, and her sister is engaged to a Prince of England. It was fun and light-hearted and quite a sweet book, and it kind of warmed the cockles of my heart in many ways. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was a nice, easy read, and I gave this 3.5 stars out of 5. And I will be looking forward to continuing the series and reading the next book, because that one tended to get more reviews than, better reviews than this one. The 15th book I've read this year was Beautiful Stranger by Christina Lauren, and this is the second book in the, I believe it's called the Beautiful Bastard series, I'm not entirely sure, but it's the Beautiful series. And this book was everything I expected it to be. It followed the trend of the first book in the series. And in this book we follow a lady called Sarah, who we met in the first book, and she moves to New York after leaving her cheating ex-fiance behind. She meets a man called Max in a nightclub, and it carries on from there, really. I don't want to say anything more about the series, but I gave it 4 big smut-filled stars. It was quite naughty, and there was more sex than story actually in this book. I enjoyed it more than book 1 overall, but I felt that the final chapter was really shite. It ruined the story, but overall I still gave it 4 stars because it was quite raunchy, quite naughty, and I breezed through it. So it was what I expected from this series, and it lived up to those expectations. So then the 16th book I read on my Kobo, and that is Grin and Beard It by Penny Reid, and this is the second book in the Winston Brothers series. I enjoyed the first book in the series, and I went into this expecting it to be a 4-star, and that was a bad move because I had a certain level of expectation from this book, and to be honest it was a 3 at a push, and that's a real push. The characters the book just didn't lack. There was a lack of chemistry between the main characters. There was no sort of drama or interest, and I didn't feel anything for the main characters, who was Sienna, who is a Hollywood actress, and Jethro, one of the brothers. So overall I was just a bit disappointed with the book. I do own the next couple in the series because I bought them all, so I will be continuing, and there's a lot of characters that I do really like and enjoy. It's just that this book unfortunately just fell short for me, and I gave it 3 stars, but I'm still not sure that it should have been a 3 stars, and it maybe should have been a 2.5. So unfortunately I wouldn't recommend this one, but I did really enjoy the first book. The 17th book I read in 2020 was Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and this is by Talia Hibbert. And this is another book that was an easy read, but I didn't really feel connected one way or another about the main characters or about the book. It was just a little bit average for me. I have to admit that I appreciated the representation of a bigger lady who is of colour, who has a chronic illness and is on the autism spectrum. I think it's excellent that these characters are being these people and characters are being represented. The book is written with half from the perspective of Chloe and half from the perspective of Red, and Red is the what's he called? Not the superintendent of the building that Chloe lives in, and he's helping her do some things on a list that she's got in order to get a life. It isn't all flowers and sunshine. There's heartbreak and pain and PTSD and lots of things that are discussed. It isn't a light-hearted read, but it is an easy read. And I would say that it's worth a read, but it wasn't a favourite for me, so I gave it a 3 to 3.5 stars. It was just a good book, really. And the 18th book that I've read in 2020, and the final book in this video that I'm going to discuss, is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I just changed their name, sorry. Tasha Kazuko. I can actually speak Japanese, I don't know why I'm struggling so much. But, and this book is set in a cafe in Tokyo in a small back alley, and this cafe has been around for over 100 years. And in this, it covers sort of time travel. So you can travel within the cafe as long as you stay in your seat to another time in the same cafe. You have to stay in your seat and you have to return before your coffee gets cold. So you have to have drunk your coffee before it gets cold. So there are quite a few restrictions, like you can't leave your seat. And then obviously you can only then see people who've been in the cafe. So you can only, you know, you have to know the time and place at the time that that person was in the cafe in order to see them. It was a nice premise, there were lots of restrictions, and it was actually quite thought-provoking in many ways. I was a bit disappointed with the restrictions because I was quite excited by this because I loved the idea of time travel, and I loved the idea that if it was unlimited, that you could do whatever you wanted, but you still only had that limited time before the coffee gets cold. But I understand the restrictions as you go through the book. You realise why there are certain restrictions. The only thing about this book, I gave it 3 stars. A lot of people love it, but I struggled a little bit. This book is translated from Japanese, of course, and I feel that in that translation, some of the depth or emotion of the language has got lost, and it's just very blunt and matter of fact, and it's almost like a commentary or a play, and it's just like so and so is sat on that chair and so is like this and XYZ. And I find that I enjoy a book more when I connect with characters and when I have sort of almost like an emotional connection or an appreciation for the story and the characters more. And because this is so felt formulaic in the way that it was written, and there was a lack of emotion in a lot of the book, there is some emotional parts, I felt that I lost something from it. But I think lots of other people have loved this book, so it is definitely worth giving it a go. It's quite a short book. I think there's only like 200 and something pages. I think it's just about 220 or something like that. So it's a quick and easy read, and I liked it, but I just gave it a 3 stars, which for me is a good book. So there we are. That's all the books that I've read so far, up to book number 18 in 2020. Of all of the books that I read, I would say maybe the Oona Lockhart one is the one that made me think of it. It's a bit of a time travel thing again, and it sort of stuck with me quite a lot. I read books and then I can't remember them. They're not memorable. I just move on to the next book and I've forgotten. But with this one, it sort of stuck with me a little bit. So I guess of all of those recent reads, that's the one that has stuck with me the most. And I'd love to hear what your favourite read has been recently. I would really appreciate that, because I'll always add them onto my to be read list. So anyway, thank you for watching, take care, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.